Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie Minato. I am from halfwheel.com, and this is Halfwheel's Packaging Awards for 2022. Hope your Thursday, today is Thursday, it's off to a good start. So, sitting to my right, now below me on the screen here, is Brooks Whittington. How are you, Brooks?
Howdy. Doing great.
All right. Brooks is great. And Patrick Lagreid has been added to the screen. How are you, Patrick?
I'm doing wonderful. Another great Thursday out here in Phoenix.
It is a Thursday, and you are in Phoenix, and we will see if it's great. So this is the Packaging Awards list for 2022. How about this? Why don't we have Brooks? Why don't you tell the audience what you are smoking, and then Patrick, you can do so as well, and I will see if I can get a cigar lit.
I am smoking a Tatuaje Frank Redux.
And I have got the Arturo Fuente Añejo number 50, which I picked up over the Thanksgiving holiday a couple weeks ago. And in an effort not to light up a Churchill during an hour-long show, I went with this guy. Charlie, what do you got there?
I'm smoking a cigar I've never smoked before. Fosforo, the new cigar from Riverside Cigar Shop. Jeff and Hunter over there, which is now being distributed by the Cigar Hustler guys, made at Nica Sueño, which was our Factory of the Year award winner, and now has led to a comment war. So fun times there. All right, so I guess I probably should have waited to light this cigar up and explain the contest first. But we are not going to take comments today. But Brooks, can you hit that mouse trackpad thing right there? The external, no. That one. There we go. Or hit the right arrow key on that keyboard. This is great production value. Keep going.
It's the same way they do it on all the major networks.
All right, we have a surprise contest just like all the major networks. So here's what we're going to do. We write a lot of words throughout the days, the weeks, and there are occasionally typos, which some of you are very annoyed by. So, and we are actively trying to fix it. Every Monday, Patrick starts his day reading a report of all the typos we made from the week before or 5 years before, and we're actively trying to get better. But we are going to have a little bit of fun with it. So in lieu of comments today, if you can find a typo somewhere in the slideshow, not in my grammar when verbally speaking or Brooks's pronunciations, if you see one on the screen, leave a comment either on Facebook or YouTube. If you're in the continental U.S. or in the U.S., if you're in Hawaii and Alaska, we'll take care of you. First one to identify a typo, you're going to win some sort of half-wheel prize pack. We'll see if we can find some actual typos here, and if no one can, then we will donate $100 to a food bank. It's got to be during the live broadcast. So if you're watching this 6 months from now, this does not count. But that's really not what we're here for. Although a typo competition would be great. We're here to watch people try to smoke cigars and talk at the same time. So this is the Packaging Awards. The name is pretty simple. Patrick, do you want to try to explain some of this while I try to make sure my cigar is going to stay lit?
Absolutely. So
Sweet.
This dates back to pre-half-wheel days in Brooks' Smoking Stogie, where he wanted to recognize the fine work that's done by people behind the scenes that we may not always see and that go beyond the cigar itself. There's a lot of work that goes into telling a story behind a cigar and bringing it to life, making it stand out on a store shelf. And so that's kind of where this originated from. In terms of what the Packaging Awards are now, so there are some qualifications and there's some process. So first and foremost in the process, or I guess qualifications, product and design must ship to stores in 2022. As you can see, they can be created by retailers. As we saw last year, we had an advent calendar that was created by a retailer that we thought merited consideration. And it's what ships in the box. So a lot of times it's basically it's cigar boxes primarily. There are some humidors that end up qualifying, but their accessories that come with it are not included in the decision making. One of the members of the Half-Wheel team, either Charlie, Brooks, Brian Burt, or myself, actually have to see it in person. This is to ensure that we've actually had a chance to get our hands on it to see how it looks in real life, not just in touched up photos. And in terms of how products get on the list, each member of the Half-Wheel team can nominate as many products as they like throughout the course of a year. And this year we ended up having 17 nominations. I don't have the breakdown of who nominated how many, but it tends to be fairly even. And it can be for whatever reason. There's not inherent guidelines other than we just think this is the top packaging of the year. It can be because of its presence in a retail store. It can be because of the story it tells. It can be because of unique innovations or novelty. It really is up to the individual person to determine what they think is the best aspects to turn into the best packaging. And a lot of times we just agree on those things. And sometimes for one year, it's one thing for one person, and the next year, it's something else. The last little note on that is that minor packaging updates are not considered. So slight changes to font, box count changes, things like that. But major packaging changes are considered. So things like JC Newman's Black Diamond Diamond Crown got a full makeover. That would be considered. When a brand does a complete refresh, that would be considered. So again, minor things, no. Full refreshes, yes. Charlie, how's that cigar coming along?
Yeah, it's been rolled
There
and
you
lit.
go.
All right, so thank you for handling that so I could get my cigar lit, Patrick. And as Patrick mentioned, we rank them 1 to 17 from sort of best to least best. Worst is maybe not the best way to describe this because these are all, pretty good at a minimum. And we simply take those scores, and once they're all turned in, we just tabulate them into an Excel spreadsheet. It looks a little something like this. And so you can see, like in Products A case, Brian Burt really liked it. Patrick, not so much. And then once all the scores are in, we add them up and rank them from lowest to highest. And it's like golf. The lowest score wins. So the lowest possible score would be 4. And I don't know if we've ever had a unanimous packaging winner. Certainly not this year. But usually there is a pretty solid agreement amongst what wins. And there have been ties for number 1 in past years. So not this year, but yeah. Anything else, guys, before we get started?
Not
Great.
really. I think just one thing to keep in mind is it's interesting to see sort of what ends up maybe a person's, where they tend to gravitate towards, whether it's innovation, design, art, different. It just kind of I think what's interesting is that our own aesthetics and preferences tend to change over the years and evolve, certainly as we see new packaging come in that we consider. So I find that to be sort of the more fascinating aspect of this whole thing.
Yeah, although the readers don't get to see that, unfortunately. But I do agree with you, and it's interesting because it's like, and you sort of alluded to this, whether it's the actual design or the originality or the execution or how well it works in a retail setting or just how pretty it is. We value all those things differently and probably over time have valued them differently on an individual basis. But with that all out of the way, we're going to get started. And number 10 is the blank screen. Number 10 is the Davidoff Winston Churchill Limited Edition 2022. Now, from this angle, this is not exactly the most interesting looking packaging, and probably not something that you would think would get on here. You could see there's maybe some white lines on the border there that might show that there's something else going on, and there is. This is not just another normal 10-count box. This is one that I think gets high remarks for a number of things. Sort of the design brief, pun intended there. And that's because this is a box that's made to look like a briefcase, specifically one of Winston Churchill's old briefcases. And when you open it up, it really does sort of feel like somebody tried to make a cigar box that is supposed to function like a briefcase. And that is obviously highlighted by what you can see in the inside of the lid, which is referred to as the Vista by cigar companies. And inside of the lid, there is a letter from Randolph S. Churchill, who is sort of the Churchill family's ambassador for the cigar project and has shown up at major cigar events around the world on behalf of the Churchill family as part of this project they have with Davidoff. And if you're curious what the letter says, we've transcribed it for you. Unfortunately, somebody's already won the typo contest, but this is probably a good place to look for one. And yeah, I really liked this box. It's just a neat idea that I think was executed really well. It's certainly, it's not made of leather. It's not rounded. It's not like distressed looking. They could have done a lot of other things to make it look like a briefcase, but I think that would have taken away from how retail friendly it is. Because at the end of the day, when it's closed, it pretty much just looks like a regular 10 count box. And 10 out of 10 in terms of, I think, executing the concept. Patrick, I think it's you. Maybe not.
I think it might have been. Well, it may have been me or Brooks.
Me, but my mic was muted.
No, it's Brooks.
Okay.
Go ahead, Brooks.
So if you're looking for my opinion, I agree with you 100%. Thank you. I agree with you 100%. Execution on this was excellent. That's not a surprise when it comes to Davidoff products, of course, but execution on this was excellent. It's just it looks great. It's a very compact package that will do really, really well on a shelf, and it just screams, open me up, find out what's inside, and everything is just everything works really, really well in harmony together for this package. It looks great. It was an instant thing for me. I was like, yeah, that's got to go on the list for sure.
I would just like to point out in this case, that is, I believe, probably the British spelling of the word facet, and not the American English spelling of.
So still correct.
Of the word facet. Well, here's the thing. I may disagree with it, and you may disagree with it, but they did invent the language, so,
They evolved the language.
Joke's on us. All right. With that out of the way.
So we move on to number 9, and it's the latest release in a series that has made several appearances on this list. In fact, all 3 of the previous releases have been on the packaging awards. It's the newest in Espinosa's Las Seis Provincias line, the CMW, which honors the pre-revolution Cuban province of Camagüey. And once again, Espinosa enlisted Cuban-born artist Eden Gutierrez to create the artwork. In this case, the company went with what could be argued as its least ambitious packaging in the series, utilizing a fairly traditional cigar box with a hinged lid, but that lid packed a pair of slide-out wings that expanded the canvas for Gutierrez to create a vista of the province that's located just to the east of Havana. Now, while it might be considered the least ambitious of the bunch, remember that this series debuted with a swinging box and then had another that used a window shutter design. It seemed to address concerns about sturdiness that arose from those previous releases, and it certainly seemed to integrate itself better onto retail shelves, maybe less of a showpiece, but one that could be displayed prominently without worrying about it getting broken as people check it out. And look, it's still a box that I think has some real serious display potential. I know I would unscrew the lid and then put it up on the wall or on a shelf or somewhere else. And I really hope that these are all displayed somewhere, hopefully in Espinosa's offices, if not somewhere else. Now, Brooks, you've had some hands-on experience with this particular release, and in particular, how those panels slide out. What did you think of it?
Well, as you said, this is definitely more sturdy than the other, entries in this series. Definitely something that you can open and close without having to worry about it breaking or anything of that nature right off, with almost no effort at all. I love the color scheme. I love the art, and it was really something that is, it's fairly simplistic in how it works compared to the last ones that he's done, but it still does exactly what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to show off the art and be something fairly unique. I hadn't even thought about actually putting it up on the wall like you mentioned, but that would be a great idea to do something like this. And all the color schemes inside work well. The color of the band, the color of the bands, and the foot bands, all really mesh really well together. And it's a fantastic look. Certainly not as interesting necessarily, especially the outside. The front of the box is not exactly inspiring. However, once you get inside, it's a different matter altogether.
Absolutely. I'm intrigued to see what they have going for the next 2. There are 2 more releases left, and certainly seeing them, go from pretty ambitious with that swinging box in the La Habana release to the shutters to the curio cabinet. I mean, definitely intrigued to see what the 5th and 6th releases have. So that's Espinosa's Las Seis Provincias CMW coming in at number 9. And at number 8 is another new release in a series that has frequently landed on this list. That's the Davidoff Zodiac series, and this is the 2023 Year of the Rabbit. Now, my first reaction at seeing this was that it wasn't as ornate as some of the previous releases, but it's in the details where this one really shines. If you start on the lid, you'll notice a design in the lacquer that's supposed to resemble the hops of a rabbit. And then there's a layer before you get to the cigars, which are arranged in this pretty unique and interesting configuration that is actually designed to resemble a rabbit's burrow. Now, it's one that looks a bit bizarre until it's explained to you, and then, as they say, the proverbial light goes on and the design makes a lot more sense. It is definitely eye-catching in a retail setting, which is how I started to pay attention to it a little bit more after seeing photos of it on the site. And for those curious, the cigars do come in cellophane, which we removed for the photos, and they do fit pretty snugly in those little slots to make sure that they're not going to be damaged on the way, to a store or to your or home from the store. Now, while it might not be the most ornate in the series, it's still very eye-catching on the shelf, packed with details, and I think it's those things that really helped land the Year of the Rabbit on this year's list. Charlie, I know you've seen it as well. What did you think of this one?
Yeah, I was certainly impressed when I saw the images when this was announced in maybe late October, early November. And then when it showed up here, it looks, I think, probably a little bit better in person than it does in pictures. I think sort of piggybacking off the Espinosa thing, it's been interesting. Davidoff really pioneered this category. We wrote about this morning that Habanos Eseata has a new Cohiba that is their 4th Zodiac calendar release. Davidoff has done, I believe, a dozen of them. I think they've completed the full calendar at this point, albeit not in sort of the full format, because the first release, the Year of the Dragon, was not exactly the same as the subsequent ones have been. That said, I give Davidoff a ton of credit for, not all of them have been excellent, but most of them have been very good at a minimum. And certainly, you would forgive them if it felt like they'd maybe run out of their best ideas after a decade. But they certainly are still coming up with some very interesting ones. I'm curious to see Espinosa's 2 more releases, what they have planned. Espinosa started off with a bang. That swinging box and sort of the idea of really rethinking how to present cigars to people, to me, was something truly special. I think in the case of the Davidoff, the packaging has always been very good. The thing that stands out to me is they just sort of created a limited edition category out of thin air that has now been knocked off by half dozen plus companies, including basically every major player in the cigar industry has copied them, whether it's Habanos or Drew Estate or General Cigar Company with STG. So kudos to Davidoff for that, and the cigars have been enjoyable as well, albeit not inexpensive. One last thing here, a special shout out. There's another Davidoff Year of the Rabbit release, the Toro, which did not make the packaging awards. It comes in a completely different box, a much more traditional cigar box, albeit one that has like trays inside of it. That box is super, super well made. If you happen to see it in a Davidoff flagship store, because that's the only place they're sold at, I would highly recommend taking a look at it. If you really want to know like what a standard cigar box just completely overdone looks like, the Year of the Rabbit Toro is certainly on that. And it's limited, albeit not that limited. All right. Let's see. Patrick, I think it's you again, right?
It is not, actually. I'm off for this one. Oh, actually, no. It's you, I believe.
Oh, yeah, sweet. All right. Let's see if I can manage all this at once. So there is no number 7 because there's a tie for number 6. And the first of the 2 number 6s is the Aventura Barbaroja Invasion. Which is a weird thing because one word is not English and the other one is English. But anyway, if you look at it from this angle, sort of similar to the first Davidoff, not exactly the most interesting box in the world. And I would forgive you for wondering why it's here. But when you open the box up, you will quickly hear and see why this is on here. So if you look at the bottom left-hand corner of the box, you will see a cutout, and that cutout has a speaker inside of it. And if you go back and you look at the top left side of the box, you'll see like a little white spot there, and that is actually what we've been told is a light sensor. And so when you open the box up, the speaker is activated, and if you're curious to know what it sounds like, this...
This is AKB's Barbarossa Invasion. Taste it or pay the price. This is AKB's Barbarossa Invasion. Taste it or pay the price.
So this is on here for the creativity, the sort of originality of it. I think pretty much every other nomination that we've ever recognized as part of the Packaging Awards, and we've been doing this for more than a decade now, has been because of how it looks or how it feels. And this is a new human sense that's been introduced, the sense of sound. And it's a very interesting concept. It's surprising, sort of, that it's taken this long. This is at least our understanding the first time that this has happened, where somebody has embedded a speaker into a cigar box. There is at least one instance of a humidor that doubles as a Bluetooth speaker, but this is a very different concept. Obviously, a cigar box and sort of not made to be a speaker, but made to use a speaker to help show off the product and make it more unique. And while the box itself may not be the most interesting looking thing, it certainly, I think, is the most interesting sounding thing on the list. And it definitely, in terms of the originality aspect, gets high marks from me. Patrick, your thoughts on this release?
Yeah, I remember when Marcel Nobel of ADV and McKay mentioned that there was going to be a new release at the trade show. And I remember him saying two things. One, that the story was going to be taking a darker turn, and that there was going to be something that I needed to stop by the booth to see in person. And so I show up, and he grabs the box off the shelf, closes the lid, opens it up, and just has this like big grin on his face. And I kind of went like, yep, that's different, and that's going on the packaging list. And I think I went right back to our little workspace and made sure it was on the list before even like downloading photos. And I think I was talking about it the rest of the day and at dinner that night. Like you said, it's probably a pretty pedestrian design from a box. Now, I like the lid. I've always been a fan of the bands and that logo. But, in terms of coming up with something to be distinctive in a crowded humidor, this is certainly unique. But the real thing that sold it for me was it brings to life a part of the story behind these cigars. Now, it is a manufactured story. The Aventura line is a fictitious story. The company used to create these little story books or story cards that would go in with the cigars they had on their website. And even though it is manufactured, it's still a story, and it's still a part of the cigar. And now they have an audio component to it with a character in the story. Where I look forward now is it makes me wonder what else we might see manufacturers try to integrate into boxes, whether it's sound or whatnot. But we've seen, as you were alluding to with the Cohiba release, they now have an NFC chip in the box. We've seen other companies do this. We've seen, obviously, QR codes that can be used to take you on a virtual journey to a farm or a factory. I have no idea what it could be a springboard for when it comes to other ideas and integrations. And while it is simple, it at least it's the first step into utilizing a different sense that we generally have not seen used in the case of cigars. So that's why Barbaroja's Invasion scored high in my book. And like I say, it's it takes a lot to pique my attention some days, and they certainly did that, because, as I said, I walked right back to the booth and made sure it was on the packaging list.
Yeah, so now that Patrick has advertised for cigars in the metaverse and on the blockchain, we're going to move on to the other tie for number 6.
Yes, that's me, and that cigar box packaging is the Aura by E.P. Carrillo. Now, this is a limited edition, limited to 1,000 boxes. I'm sorry, I apologize. 2,500 boxes, $1,000 a box is the MSRP. But only like 450 of them are coming to the U.S. The rest of them are going around the world. And what this is another one of those cigar, creations that actually is, inspired by the Chinese zodiac calendar. Now, each one of these boxes has 12 cigars in it. Each one of those cigars has a different blend. And they're all in the same 6 1/8 by 52 torpedo Vitola. Now, each one of these cigars, as I mentioned, has a different band on it that signifies a different animal of the zodiac calendar. And the cool thing about this box, other than the fact that it's obviously limited and has all these different blends in it, is that it's got not only a humidifier in it, humidifier, but also has a booklet that explains all of the different blends along with the animal counterparts that they are supposed to represent. Very, very well done. Packaging. It's a red and gold color scheme, which is not unusual for these type of releases, since red is a very important color in Chinese culture. And it's a very large, heavy box. When we got it here at the studio, I was like, this doesn't look like a standard EPC release. It's very, very ornate, very heavy, and very, very impressive. Especially when you open it up and you see all the cigars laying there. Now, there's problems that I have with it. One of them is, obviously with each one of them having a different blend, it's a very, it's going to be difficult if you like it to get more of them. But in terms of the actual packaging and what comes with it and everything was very well thought out and works together seamlessly. I loved it myself.
Yeah, I saw this first in September at Intertobacco. This is a collaboration of sorts with Cigar Specialist, which is a company that's based in Asia. And I was originally led to believe this was mostly going to be in Asia. I was surprised to actually see it sold here in the U.S. And the team over there was very proud of it. And, you see a lot of new cigars at trade shows. But this definitely stood out as one of the key takeaways of sort of coolest products I saw at Intertobacco. The booklet to me is something that, it's not like an advancement in sort of printing technology or anything like that, but the inclusion of it, I think, is so smart, and I give them a ton of credit for thinking to do that. So that way, if you do spend all this money and buy this box with 12 different blends inside of it, you have some guidance about what you're smoking and why it might be different, not just because one's lighter than the other one. I think the other thing that's, someone that has not smoked any of the cigars out of this, I imagine that smoking these is going to be a very interesting experience for the consumer. If you smoke them, all of them, not all in one sitting, but, if you spend a month just sort of going through it one by one, because you're going to see a different side of a factory in the different blends, but there's also some limitations because they're all the same size, they're all made at the same factory, and that factory probably only has a limited, not supply of tobaccos, but a limited number of the types of tobaccos that it uses. And so you're going to get to see how maybe minor changes can have major impacts and sort of see a different side of the blending process that's a bit different. As far as the packaging, it's if you're going to spend $1,000 on a cigar box, you're going to want something that's this nice, and I appreciate some of the attempts at being a bit more utilitarian with it. All right, believe that is number 6.
That was. So coming in number 5 is one of the most interesting boxes I saw at the PCA show last year, and that is the Highclere Castle Signature. Now, Highclere Castle is a Foundation cigar company release, and it is a very, very interesting box, not just visually, but also the story behind it. So essentially, this is a release that commemorates the 100th anniversary of the discovery of King Tut's tomb in 1922. And now, the tomb was found by an archaeologist named Howard Carter, who just happened to be the 5th Earl of Carnarvon of Highclere Castle. And so all of it matches in together, obviously connects together. And the cool thing about this box is the idea that the box was actually designed by archaeologists, and it's actually a representation, a replica of a box that was found inside of King Tut's tomb. And so it looks almost exactly like it. There are slight differences in the hieroglyphs, but it's essentially, visually just like the box that was found in the tomb. And inside are 12 6 3/4 by 52 Perfectos, $33 each for those. And it's a very, very ornate box, very, very nice looking, very well done. And everything really meshes together when you look at it and you look at the cigars inside. All of the logos, all the colors are really, really, clean and concise. And more importantly, I showed my wife this, and she said, she wouldn't mind having this on the mantle, which is a pretty big deal when you talk about my wife and cigars. So this is something that I was blown away by when I saw it for the first time. Have not smoked the cigar yet, but the packaging is fantastic. Patrick, any thoughts on this? Can't hear him.
Patrick, have you muted yourself, and I cannot control that?
I am sorry about that. No, I am sorry
What
about
Patrick
that.
was saying, for those of you that were watching, is that
Yeah.
Brooks' wife said, "Brooks, that's where your ashes are going."
This is true.
That would
no,
be an awesome place to put my ashes. I don't think they'd fit in there, honestly.
Yikes.
No, I'm sorry. I think what you touched on a lot of the things, and one of the things that's become sort of a theme for me in this year's packaging awards. There's been a lot of projects that have brought the backstory of a cigar to life really well. The packaging is one step on the process from, the tobacco when it's a seed to the finished product that you end up smoking. And in the case of the Senator, it really did try and capture a very important, archaeological discovery that I also remember when I was a kid, because I remember the tours of King Tut's tomb that were going around the country, mid 80s maybe. So to see this sort of brought back and executed so well was really, really impressive. And I think you touched on this, Brooks, forgive me if not. There are some Easter eggs in the design, or there's some messaging that's been included in hieroglyphics. And that to me is just another one of these layers of, if you start at the most basic thing, you put cigars in a bundle, and then you put them in a box, and then you design and dress up the box. And then you add, you can add layers into what the designs are. And that was just something that, again, great backstory, great way to execute it, great way to bring it to life, great way to put layers on it. And again, one of these things that I think you touched on, it's a box that you want to hold on to. And that to me is always one of the biggest compliments that I can give a cigar maker, is that once I'm done with the cigars, I want your box to get the proper display and proper attention it deserves. And
perhaps more importantly, it's a box that doesn't look like a box of cigars. And that is, you wouldn't know. I mean, if I saw this in a store of some sort, I would never in my life think to myself, that's a box of cigars. And to have a box that is so obviously not a box of cigars is pretty impressive to me as well. One that works so well as it does.
Very true. Very true. So with that, we will move on to number 4. My math is correct. This release took me back to some of my earliest days of smoking cigars, and it's the 2022 version of the CAO Vision. Now, this is the third version of the Vision. The first debuted in 2007. It was known for high gloss white boxes that had a blue light inside the box. The second version was released in 2020, held on to the general aesthetics of that original design. But for the third release, which came out this year, General switched things up both in design and color. Now, instead of a traditional box design, the company went with one that has 2 slide out trays, while the colors shift from blue in the original to orange now. Now, when plugged in and switched on, the logo on the top of the box lights up, and then when the drawers are opened, the lights around the individual drawer come to life. Internally, there's also a spot for humidification, while the box gets what the company calls holographic treatments for a unique look. Now, while the previous 2 releases were boxes with lights, this seemed to be designed to be a real showpiece, especially when it can be given the proper display space. It might not be the most practical for some retailers who have to find the space and even now an outlet for it, but even without the light, it is still eye-catching and distinctive. Now, Brooks, you had some hands-on experience with the CAO Vision. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I love the look of it, and I love how the lights, light up. And just to be clear, the lights don't actually light up around the edges of the drawers unless you open them, which I found. I'd love to be able to display something like this if I was displaying something like this. I'd love to be able to display something like this with the lights on all the time, but they actually cut off after 30 seconds as well. Something that I obviously is something that is probably necessary, but I would like to have that a little longer, as somebody said in the comments. Having said that, it's a gorgeous piece of really, really good looking packaging. It's a little flimsy. I noticed as I was shooting it that one of the pieces of one of the covers of the drawers have come off in shipping. Easy to fix, but it's definitely not a something you can drop and not feel it for sure. But it is definitely well done in terms of the overall look and visual presentation. And I think it's fantastic in terms of just looking on the shelf and that kind of thing. I don't know how good it is as an actual humidor, since it does have the guts inside. You can put humidifiers in there, but in terms of the actual visual presentation, it's really great.
All right, with that, we move on to number 3.
So number 3 comes in. The number 3 packaging is the Castagli Cipher 3311. Now, I'm a sucker for a packaging with a backstory, as the previous one that I talked about proves. And this is something that has a really great backstory that is fairly involved. So basically, this packaging is made as a tribute to a Major A.T. Castagli, who is the grandfather of the company founder, Jeremy Castagli. And during World War II, Major Castagli was captured by Nazis and held as a prisoner of war in a castle in Spangenberg, Germany. Now, I've been there, actually, when I was younger. And while he was a POW, the Major passed messages to other POW camps and to family members and things of this nature, hidden in needlework stitchings. And some of these stitchings had different phrases in them that were hidden. Things like, God Save the Queen and F Hitler and things of this nature. And the packaging actually goes into and actually represents this in a very, very just a great and unique way. For example, there are a lot of Morse code, which the Major also put into some of his stitchings. Morse code around the edge of the box, as well as around the edge of the coffins in the actual box itself, the coffins that cigars come in. It's a very personal packaging and something that, it's just full of different things that you look at and think, oh, this is cool, this is awesome, this is, all of the crest and everything, all of the symbols mean something, and it's just an awesome way to actually, commemorate somebody personal in your life while also being, cool packaging for cigars. And I loved it. I loved just about everything about it, and I thought it was really, really well done. And if I knew Morse code, I could actually read it. I don't. But it's very, very cool and something that I think deserves the third place that it got on the list.
Yeah, you touched on pretty much all the things I like about this. I love this release for so many reasons, and as I've mentioned today and elsewhere, I really like to acknowledge the story behind a cigar, and this release brings to life a truly, truly rich story. There are both the visible things that will hopefully lead the smoker to ask questions about the release. There are details like Morse code that some people will realize, and that may call their attention to a cigar that they might otherwise walk by. And then it gives people that know Morse code something to engage with. You've got the card inside, you've got the QR code. It really works on a lot of layers for me. Plus, this is a backstory that not everyone has. And it's celebrating that which makes each of us unique and our unique stories, and that's a real big plus in my book. So again, it works on a lot of levels, and again, in an era when there's a lot of things that are sort of manufactured, this is probably the most genuine of the releases that I think you're going to see on our list, and just well executed from top to bottom. So with that, we move on to number 2, and this is a very limited edition that I first saw back in January at the TPE show. It's the Romeo y Julieta Bed of Roses Humidor. Now, this vertically oriented humidor comes with a new release called the Bed of Roses, a Nicaraguan Puro offered in a Churchill Vitola that was produced by Plasencia. 24 of those cigars are presented on slide-out trays in the upper half of the humidor, while a hygrometer separates them from the 3 drawers on the bottom for more cigars or supplies. The piece measures 20 inches tall, 12 inches both wide and deep, making it an impressive, if not really overwhelming piece, honoring a well-known brand in the cigar world. And it can be displayed either in a retail humidor or at home. And then you throw on some solid construction, locking door, and you have a real winning design in my book. Charlie, you were with me at TPE when this debuted. I'm curious to hear what you thought of it.
Yeah, Altadis has a pretty lengthy history of doing big, medium to large size, larger than desktop humidors. We actually have one here at the office that I bought, 12 years ago, that's got 8 pull-out drawers, a Romeo humidor as well. They did a series honoring some iconic American monuments where the humidors are really made to look like those monuments. And this is just another in a long line of, Altadis USA, one of the largest cigar companies in the world, being super creative and really thinking outside the box. And certainly this isn't what's the most important thing on the balance sheet for them, but it does show the capability that the designers that they have and that they contract have, and then the ability to execute it for a sort of a flagship release for them. And I haven't smoked the cigars yet. Patrick, have you gotten a chance
I have
to
not,
smoke
no.
them? Yeah,
No,
I mean,
I've not.
the super limited nature of these meant that they sort of were on sale, and then probably in most places, once one person came in, that was kind of the end of it. But a very, very interesting release. One thing I would like to point out here, those trays, not only, you can see it in the picture there on the right-hand side, not only do they have like some separation in between the individual slots for cigars, but there's also even more cutouts for humidity to pass through, which is something that's important for a release like this. So really thinking through, how to make sure this is a usable piece going forward. And in person, just sort of you're gravitated towards the size and the bright red color of it. All right. So that's going to lead us to number 1. And number 1 is the Mirfield cigar Richard Double Robusto. Now, before we talk about the packaging, I'm going to let Brooks sort of go in depth in the details of it. I do think it's probably worthwhile to point out who the Mirfields are, because many of you probably have not heard of them compared to the other 9 companies or 8 companies who have been mentioned throughout the show. The Mirfield's history with tobacco, I'm guessing, outdates most or predates most families that are still working in the cigar industry today. They are longtime European tobacco traders back when that was a much wider profession that people had. And they are best known in sort of modern times for one of 2 things. They are the international distributors for Arturo Fuente through a company that's now called Arturo Fuente International. Fuente has like local distributors, but Fuente ships all of its cigars, except those that go to the U.S. and I believe the Dominican Republic, get shipped to the Mirfields, and then they get distributed locally throughout. And then the other thing that they are really known for, and the thing that I first knew of the Mirfields for, is that they control the vast majority of the sale of African Cameroon tobacco. Now, the Mirfields have dabbled in making their own cigars or having cigars made for them with their own names on them over the last decade, but last year really kind of seemed like a turning point. This is one of a number of new releases from the Mirfield family, and this is the high-end upper echelon release, which is immediately apparent once you get past the lid. So that lid covers, there's also a bottom piece to it that is made out of the same wood, and when you open it up, the cigars look like, well, not entirely like this, they actually look like this when you open them up, and they are packed with plastic. There's a sort of a black bar you can see on the screen there that helps to keep them in place. There's a very close to perfectly aligned Boveda pack, as well as some informational cards, and it's massive. These are double Robusto cigars, so it's very hard to sort of sense the scale of it unless it's you can see it in person. And the ashtray really sort of makes it look deceiving because it's like, oh, it's just a 2-cigar ashtray. But it is giant, and the execution level here is, I think, pretty much unparalleled. The best way that I can describe this is about a month ago, I was in a store, and they had just gotten this in, and they had it on display in the humidor, and I was with an executive from another cigar company, and he was sort of looking at it and was just like, what on earth? And my point to him was, look, if you're going to spend $85 a cigar, which I believe is roughly what these cost, at least in a no-tax state, if you're going to spend $85 per cigar, you want it to feel and look different than any of the other cigars in the humidor, and there is nothing that looks like this, other than some of the other Mirfield releases they have planned. But Brooks, do you want to talk about some of the sort of detail aspects, which we could probably do for another hour if we needed to?
Yeah, and you touched on it, but the idea that the amount of detail, the attention to detail that this packaging has is something that I've very rarely seen. I think I'm muted.
No, you're good.
Okay.
But one thing I'd like to point out here, so in case I forgot to mention it, perhaps the most important part. So Richard is a reference to Richard Mirfield. He is sort of a key figure in the history of Cameroon tobacco. He unfortunately died at a pretty young age. He's the father of the family's current generation, which includes Jeremiah, Joshua, and their sister Melissa. And this sort of comic book type inspired art explains sort of his history with Cameroon tobacco. But if you smoke cigars like Arturo Fuente Don Carlos or a lot of releases from La Aurora, General Cigar Company, this is where that tobacco comes from, at least if it's African Cameroon. Proceed.
So as I was saying, the attention to detail is really, really impressive on this. It's not just the packaging and how these cigars are arranged or shipped or anything like that. It's everything that goes along with it. The cartoon that comes along with the packaging, the fact that the entire ashtray is actually covered in is actually wrapped in plastic for shipping. The box that it comes in is extremely heavy and very, very sturdy. It's not going to have any problems when you're shipping these things if you're not throwing it around on purpose. The cigars themselves look fantastic. The bands are ornate and very, very well done. And when you open up the actual package and actually look at the ribbon. The ribbon actually is something that is very unique. That's something I haven't seen very often at all, where the actual letters are actually a different material and are actually, placed onto the ribbon in a way that is very, very distinctive and not something that is very easy to do, I'm sure, or very inexpensive. All of this, and this is just the ribbon inside. You understand? This is all goes together to make one package that is unparalleled as far as I'm concerned. It goes down also to taking the cigars out. When you take cigars out of the ashtray itself, you can, of course, use it as an ashtray, which is kind of the point. Well or not, I don't know. But you can certainly use it as an ashtray. But when you take out the cigars, I was shocked when I took out the cigars, because when you take them out, you got a picture of that?
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a second.
Oh, okay, well, then I'll get to that in a second then.
I think that the phrase "pictures don't do it justice," and our photography's gotten a lot improved thanks to Brooks. But
and thanks to Charlie.
Pictures don't do it justice. Really, I'm not sure there's anything that's really applied more than this release. It is very, very difficult to feel sort of the weight of and the presence that this thing has. To give you an idea of how large this packaging is, that is a quarter. And the ashtray that is next to it is sort of the standard French porcelain 2-cigar ashtray that you've seen from companies like Davidoff and S.C. Dupont and plenty of other ones. That is the Mirfield 2-cigar ashtray that this thing, or tray that this thing comes inside of. The reason why we were sort of making a joke that you can't really use it as an ashtray is because the size is comical. We have a picture of it here. But this doesn't give the perspective. Those just kind of look like petite Coronas. They are not. And Brooks, you wanted to talk about the little points that you can see there?
Yeah, and it goes back to the idea of the details, right? I mean, a lot of companies use, things inside, stands or something to make sure that cigars aren't damaged, or try to make sure they're not damaged in transit. But these are actually, silver.
Not silver.
Gold?
Gold plated.
Gold plated, stands that each one of these cigars are actually, placed into. Just the detail is amazing. It's something that, if I was going to buy an $85 cigar, and it would go down a lot easier, I think, getting something like this as the actual packaging itself. Yeah, it's a lot of money, but yeah, you get an ashtray that you can either use or not. But it's fantastic. Something that I haven't seen before, and something that was very easy number one place for me. Patrick?
Yeah, I don't know how much more praise we can heap on this thing. It really is impressive, and I think what's been the most interesting is hearing you guys talk about the size of this thing. It is, compared to what we think of as a normal 2-cigar ashtray, not dwarfs it. It's what, 3 times the size? Probably.
Ish.
I mean,
probably
you saw
more than that. I mean, it's massive.
It's just, and the thought behind it, and things like those little rests where the cigars go, and just how much time was probably spent to make sure everything was aligned and shipped and wrapped, and just it's one of those things that you just go, this is first class all the way. And I find myself staring at those bands and thinking about the die cutting process to get to that point, not to mention the treatment that was given to the letters in the Mirfield name. I think, Charlie, you had some thoughts on the ribbon as to why it was unique. Or I remember you mentioned something to me about the ribbon being even different than what you see on most cigar releases. It's just everything about this was a step or two, if not 10 up from what you are used to seeing in cigar presentation.
Yeah, I mean, they made a very, very big deal during a ostentatious announcement for this cigar about how impressive the packaging was, and it looked really nice in pictures, but in person it's just a completely different level. The execution and the presence that the overall package has, now that we're making penis jokes, is just, I'm not sure, certainly on this list, but you would struggle to find other cigar boxes that I think are executed at this level that you could consider to be contemporaries to this. It's not for everyone. It certainly is very, very expensive, but if we're going to have a packaging awards list, no surprise to see this at the very top of it. And speaking of the packaging awards list, Patrick, you want to run down for those that might have tuned in late?
Absolutely. So here is the full list of the 2022 Half Wheel Packaging Awards. You can obviously read them all on the screen there. Congratulations to all the companies and individuals behind these products and all the companies and individuals who were nominated. It was another strong year with really outstanding competition. So getting one of those 17 nominations is an accomplishment in and of itself. And having been a part of this for several years now, I know that it's more than just a cigar for a lot of people. It is the packaging, it's the presentation, it's the artwork, the creativity, because just like there are people that touch your cigar, whether it's, planting the seeds, harvesting the leaves, hanging them, curing them, fermenting them, all that stuff. There are people who are working with, design tools and wood and paint and screen printing and band making that are all part of that process too. And it is a real big accomplishment and achievement for these highly talented professionals, and certainly an honor to recognize their hard work over the last 12 months in making the cigars that show up on store shelves look so good and really, tell stories, bring things to life, whatever it may be. It really is an honor to recognize those individuals and those companies that commit to really putting presentation and packaging at the top of their list.
Yeah, so that is the packaging awards. I'm guessing that some of you would like to know what our top 25 cigars of 2022 are, and that will be announced tomorrow, or they will be announced tomorrow. We will be back at the same time and places, so Facebook and YouTube, at 12 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow to talk about those products. And some of you are also probably interested in another top 25 list called the Consensus, which will be explained in much greater detail at a later point on Monday, actually, at 12 p.m. Central Time as well. That will just be me. The one note for the Consensus, we don't really take questions for this show or the one we're doing on Friday, but on Monday, the Consensus live show I'm going to announce them pretty quickly, and then I'm going to take questions. So if you have questions about the Consensus or about this list or about the one for tomorrow or about some other things, we can do that on Monday. Anything else, guys? Nope.
I'm good.
All right. Sweet. Thank you all for tuning in. Once again, congratulations to all of the winners and the people behind the packaging that made the list. And we will see all of you tomorrow, or hopefully all of you.